Okay. Bruchim habayim. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for the learning of Hilchot Shabbat. We are continuing in our study of the 39 Melachot, which this week is a very special week to learn the laws of Shabbat, as this week, Parashat Vayakel is the source for all of Hilchot Shabbat, all of them. As we know, Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai. It was the day after Yom Kippur. Hashem forgave everybody for the golden calf. And as a way to show that Hashem still wanted to have a relationship with Bnei Yisrael, Hashem said, I want you to build the Mishkan. So he came down, Moshe came down with two messages from Hashem. Number one, keep Shabbat. Number two, build the Mishkan. And the question is, obviously, what's the connection between the two? So Rashi says the first thing is you can't build the Mishkan on Shabbat. That's number one. But the Gemara tells us it's more than that. It's that if you want to know what's forbidden to do on Shabbat, look at how they construct the Mishkan and what they do to build the Mishkan. That's what you can't do on Shabbat. So those 39 labors are what we're learning now. So just so that we don't skip, I'm going to say over another melacha, which doesn't really have that many practical applications, but it's called Melechet Minapitz. The way that it worked was they needed to make curtains for the Mishkan. And the curtains were huge, huge curtains that would go from the roof all the way down to the sides, draping over 3 huge curtains. And a lot of them were made with wool. And when it comes to shearing wool, so as we learned already, they had to shear the wool off of the sheep, but then you can't just shear it off of the sheep and use it. You must first comb it out. They would take these huge combs and they would comb out the wool in order that they could make it into separate individual fibers that they could then spin and make it into thread and then use it for whatever they needed to use it for, to make those curtains. So part of the wool making process is called menapetz, which is translated as combing. So you have to comb out the wool. So combing the wool whenever you want to make threads is a problem. But there aren't really that many practical cases that come up. The only thing that I saw them talk about, he talks about it here, the Lamatet Melachot book, Rabbi Ribiat, he brings down that there are some poskim who say that combing a shaitel on Shabbat is menapetz. And the reason that he says that is because when you comb it, even though it's not your own personal hair, but it's separating those fibers, separating the hairs one from the other to have them like individualized. So they say it's very similar to what they did when they combed the wool of the sheep, and therefore they claim that it is a problem of menapetz on Shabbat to comb your shaitel. Men's hair that's on their body. So men's hair, what? So combing your hair in general is an issue of shedding the hair. So if you know, for example, that when you comb your hair, for sure it's gonna come out, so then it's a problem. So we learned that it has to be done in a way that it's not going to come out necessarily. It's not for a fact going to come out. So if, let's say, you use a very soft brush, like a baby brush, and you kind of very gently, use it like that, and it's not for sure going to come out, then we said it's fine.
So it's for men also, right?
It's for men as well. Yes, sure. If it's for, if you know that by brushing it, you're going to take out hair, which usually is the case, so you can't use that. It has to be a soft brush. Usually soft brushes, though, they don't really do much. The best thing to do is more like gently, so that you're not for sure going to rip out hair. Okay, great. So others, however, argued, and they said that combing the hair of a shaitel is not a problem of menapetz. The reason is because, like we said, menapetz, which means combing, is a problem when you're trying to make individualized pieces of wool so that you could spin them into thread. But over here, you're not spinning anything into thread. That's an issue. So therefore, it's not the same at all. And therefore, they hold it's allowed. You are permitted to comb the shaitel if it's necessary for you to do that. But all opinions agree that if the shaitel is so out of, out of whack, it's not set at all, it's just not wearable as is, and you must comb it in order to wear it, so then we fall into a different category. And that's called fixing a vessel on Shabbat. And you just fixed a vessel because this was supposed to be something you could wear. It wasn't. And you made it wearable. So therefore, they say that that would be prohibited according to all opinions. So you can't wash and set the shaitel on Shabbat. Yeah.
But what do you mean by wearable? Because it could be a big knot, and I wouldn't want to walk out with a big knot in my shaitel. So for some people, it might be wearable. For some people, like, it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? So
I guess the criteria is, can you put it on right now as is and go outside with it? If the answer is yes, then you could comb it. If the answer is no, I can't. It's impossible. It just looks too bad. It's too much of a mess. I have to do something. So now you're fixing it, problem. It might be a little subjective. Yeah, it's true. Okay. But that's regarding shaitels. Okay, fine. So, like I said, Melechet Menapetz does not really have that many practical applications as far as I saw. Okay, the next melacha that we're going to talk about is Melechet Sovea. Now, this has a lot of practical applications. Melechet Sovea means the act of coloring. Okay, act of coloring. Now, coloring in the construction of the Mishkan was in a number of places. Like we learned, they needed to make dyes in order to color that wool. So they had to plant the dyes, they had to harvest them, pound them into a powder, mix them with water, cook them, and eventually they took the wool that they sheared off the sheep and they put it inside. And they made that wool into a colored wool. So coloring on Shabbat is prohibited. Now, this has a lot of practical applications that we need to be aware of. By the way, it wasn't just there, it was also with the tchelet. The tchelet is there was a special fish that they needed to catch, fish / snail, called the chilazon. The chilazon was a kind of snail that when you would cut it, you'd see blue blood. And that's where we would get the color tchelet from. Tchelet is the blue color that's supposed to go on every set of tzitzit, and a lot of the Mishkan was supposed to be made with this color blue as well, similar to the sky. So there's a lot of coloring involved in the construction of the Mishkan, and therefore, if you color something in a way that it lasts, and that's a very important thing to understand, we'll soon see why. But the melacha of coloring is when you color in a way that it lasts. When you do that on Shabbat, so that is considered to be a melacha, and that would be violating Shabbat. Okay, so very important. So what are the important things to understand about Sovea? So first of all, Sovea usually refers to coloring something, like we said, a material to make it look a certain way, coloring maybe some kind of canvas, some kind of painting. These are acts of coloring, right? When you color a human being, okay, so that is usually not something that lasts forever, unless they do like a permanent type of a makeup or something like that, which lasts for a long time. But usually speaking, it's not the case. It's a temporary thing. And once it becomes temporary, so then it automatically downgrades to a rabbinic violation of coloring, but nonetheless forbidden. But soon we'll see why that makes a big difference. So let's talk about the types of things that would be prohibited for us to do. So first of all, makeup. Let's go to makeup. So number one, can you put on lipstick on Shabbat? The answer is no. No lipstick on Shabbat. Why? Because it's coloring your lips. And also you're smearing the lipstick on your lips. That's a problem of smearing, which is a separate issue. Okay. Eyeliner, also prohibited on Shabbat. Mascara, that also is a problem. Mascara, if I'm not mistaken, is what goes in the eyelashes, correct? Mm-hmm. Right. But the eyeliner is on the actual lid, eyelid. Right. Okay. Okay. Okay, so eyeliner is no good, mascara is no good. Nail polish, no good, right? That would be coloring your nails on Shabbat. That would be a big problem. Now, we're gonna learn that when it comes to removing makeup, it's actually not a problem to remove the makeup. You could wash that off. But nail polish, however, is a little bit different because the nails, I think that from what I gather from what the poskim say, the nail polish is a little bit of a different, meaning it goes on nails, it doesn't go on the flesh of a person. So it's a little bit of a different status. So that you cannot remove because that is kind of there to last for a long time. I don't know how long usually nail polish, just standard nail polish lasts for. I mean, what is it usually? A couple of days? Okay, so I guess it's a little bit more significant than regular makeup. How much does regular makeup normally last for?
Depends.
Okay.
Huh?
Depends what you buy.
Uh-huh.
There's some eyeliners that can last for days.
Really?
Yeah.
So it could be even more than nail polish?
I would say so.
Interesting. But I think the difference between nail polish and everything else from what I'm seeing is that it goes on the nails. I guess the nail is a material that that is a little bit different than the flesh of a person. So the poskim say that you cannot remove nail polish on Shabbat. So you can't take, let's say, whatever nail polish remover and do that. But the other things you could. Now, there is this thing out there called Shabbat makeup. So I don't know the details of the Shabbat makeup, but I can tell you what Chacham Vadia says the criteria of permissible makeup would be. He says the following. He says when it comes to powder, so if the powder is like a very weak type of a powder, meaning that you put it on and it's just there kind of sitting on your face. It's not getting absorbed into your skin. Like for example, if it's cream based or like oil based and it sinks into your skin already, that's a problem. This is just a powder that is so light that if you would just go like this, it would come off. If that's the kind of powder that you want to use, then that would be acceptable. Again, provided that it's not the kind of powder that lasts for a while. It's not a cream base. Or if, let's say, you had already put oil on your skin ahead of time, and now that really light powder is getting absorbed into that skin because of your oil that you applied earlier, that would also be a problem. So here we're talking about your face is not with oil or cream, it's just regular powder that you're putting on. So according to Chacham Vadia, if it meets that criteria, that number one, it's not going to last a while, it's very light, it's not cream based, and you didn't put cream on Friday, so that you would be allowed to put on Shabbat. And you'd be allowed to remove it as well. I believe that they have these out there. There are certain types of powders that, and even if they're colored, it's okay. Clear? Is this standard knowledge? Is this like very what? This is standard knowledge? Okay, great. Fantastic. I'm happy. Okay. The poskim talk about eating foods that leave color on your mouth or your lips, like strawberries or other types of foods like that. So that everyone says is perfectly fine because you didn't intend to make your lips redder or something. You're just trying to eat the food, so there's no problem to, let's say, eat something like that and then wipe it off. However, Shulchan Aruch does say something interesting, which is that when you wipe off something that has that kind of heavy color, that you're cleaning off, let's say, your mouth from this heavy color, so don't use like a white cloth for that. The reason is because that white cloth is now going to be colored by whatever is on your lips. So if, let's say, you ate something that's really red all over the place, and now you wipe off, let's say, a nice cloth napkin with that, now it's going to get colored. The poskim say that you should avoid doing that. So instead, you could use a napkin, you could use a tissue, something that's going to go straight in the garbage. Okay? So that's okay. So too, let's say somebody, unfortunately, has a nosebleed or is bleeding from some other part of the body, hand or whatever. So then, again, it's the same story. Better not to just put a cloth onto the blood because it's getting colored. Now, the truth of the matter is that it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Would it be the same thing of still, let's say someone spills grape juice, you shouldn't use a white cloth?
Be better, yeah. It would be better because you should try to avoid the coloring. Now, the truth of the matter is that there is room to argue on what I'm saying right now. Again, I'm quoting Shulchan Aruch, but the truth is that there are a bunch of questions that we could ask over here. The first question is, hey, am I trying to color this napkin? It's actually getting dirty. I can't wait to clean it up and wash it and get rid of the color from here. I don't want to color. I'm not trying to color. So that's a very valid point. But nevertheless, there's a rule. The rule is that when we see that a comment was made by somebody from the earlier generations, even if we have questions on it, we have to nullify our own opinion according to and follow that particular opinion. So the Bet Yosef, who is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, he actually brought down an opinion of one of the great sages from France, Rabbi Eliezer from Mitz. And Rabbi Eliezer was one of the Shonim. So even though many of us after that comment was made had questions, Shulchan Aruch had questions, everybody, but the Shulchan Aruch said, I'm not going to ignore what he said. Being that he was one of the Rishonim, I have to bring it down. So he says, Yesh Mishomer, there's a great opinion that says that when you wipe off your face with that you just ate strawberries and all other kinds of red things, don't wipe with a white cloth because you're coloring it. Okay, so that's an important thing to realize as well. And so too, when it comes to bleeding, don't just use a white cloth. Better, first of all, to wash off the blood and then cover it up with a white cloth if you want to, or if you can avoid the cloth and use, let's say, a paper towel, that would definitely be a much better solution because paper towels go straight in the garbage afterwards. It's not a cloth that you are coloring, it's just garbage.
What about a Band-Aid?
So again, try and clean off the thing first, clean off the blood, wash it off, and then you put it on. That would be the best thing. Okay. Now, it goes a little bit more detailed, but the poskim talk about it, so it's important to know. The poskim discuss, let's say for some reason there was a newlywed couple, and the first time that they were able to be together was on Friday nights. And there's a possibility that there might be some blood there. So the poskim say over here, there's absolutely no problem. Why? Because remember, the very important rules that we've been talking about, that this act of coloring is really rabbinic. It's all totally midrabanan. So Chacham Vadia writes, Bimkom mitzvah lo gazru. When there's a mitzvah to be done, there's no gezerah. So that might not be so practical, but I'll tell you where it could be more practical. What if a lady needs to examine herself for, let's say, beginning the 7 clean days that she's supposed to go through? So you say to yourself, well, you're doing an internal exam. There might be some colors that are going to come onto the cloth. So is that considered to be an act of coloring? So again, over here we have a very important idea one more time, that this lady is trying to make herself able to go to the mikveh. So this is for the purposes of a mitzvah. Again, this cloth is getting dirty. It's not something that you're interested in. So the whole thing to begin with is just rabbinic. And we can say that the rabbis did not make a decree for the purposes of a mitzvah. So that's very important to be aware of as well. Furthermore, I would add that it's not necessarily so that any coloring is going to be taking place at all. That's an important thing to think about too. Not necessarily will there be anything on that cloth. That's an added reason to permit doing any kind of bidika for those purposes. Okay. Yes, that's also true. But that is a little bit different because that's actually the material there is a real cloth material. Yeah.
Another cloth you might throw in the machine.
Correct.
And you wash it later.
Correct. That's true too. That's true as well. 100%. Okay. So another interesting thing that you have to think about, coloring comes in a lot of different places. An interesting question that he brings down over here is the idea that sometimes a person might need to do some kind of a test of some sort. Perhaps it's a pregnancy test, perhaps it's a diabetic urine test, one of these sticks that a person has to urinate on. So over here, this is a little bit of a different type of thing to think about, because what's happening is you're actually looking to get color on this stick. You want to see, is it 1, is it 2, is whatever the situation is, right? So over here, you're actually trying to color over here. So therefore, if you can avoid doing that on Shabbat, then that is definitely the proper thing. I mean, it's probably asur to do on Shabbat. What if a person has to? God forbid, like we said, there's a diabetic urine test as well. So then, consult with a Rav to know exactly what would be the right way to do it, because it's not so simple. Again, you're actually, in this case, it's a little different. You're looking for the coloring. You're trying to color. You're going to color too. It's either this or that. It's different options. COVID tests, right? This or that. You have to know what it is. So therefore, it's a bit of an issue, but it's important to think about these things. We don't really usually think about them. Okay. So good. That's with respect to coloring in those areas. Now, what about shoe polish on Shabbat? That's another thing, right? Shoe polish is definitely coloring onto a shoe. It's on leather, so it's a little bit different. I believe that the poskim say that that's forbidden rabbinically, but nevertheless, it is still forbidden. Now, I want to point out something very important about when somebody does something that's forbidden on Shabbat. If you remember, I think we spoke about this when we talked about cooking. The idea that when somebody does something forbidden on Shabbat, so the halacha says that if you yourself did it, so then you are not allowed to benefit from that thing until Shabbat is over. Once Shabbat is over, you can benefit from that item. So let's say somebody by mistake, he forgot at Shabbat and he cooked a soup on Shabbat. So on Shabbat, he can't eat the soup. After Shabbat, he could have the soup if he did it by mistake. If he did it on purpose, he's never allowed to have the soup, but others could have the soup, right? I believe we spoke about this. Did we talk about this? Okay, amazing. Now, this is all when it comes to a melacha midoraita. Okay, very important to realize this. That's only when the person did a Torah level melacha. However, if the person did something which is only forbidden rabbinically, so over here, the halacha is a little different. The Vilna Gaon, and this is what pretty much everybody follows, which is, he explains that when something is prohibited only rabbinically, so then the person who does it by mistake on Shabbat could still benefit from it. So let's say in this case, polishing your shoes on Shabbat. Let's say we're going to call that rabbinically prohibited on Shabbat. It's on leather. It's not exactly getting absorbed. Let's just say it's superficial. Fine. Okay. So therefore, we're going to say that this is only rabbinically prohibited on Shabbat. Somebody goes and polishes his shoes with shoe polish on Shabbat. So we'll tell him, look, did you know you're not allowed to do it? And he'll say, I had no idea. I thought it was totally fine. So we'll tell him, look, you could still wear your shoes on Shabbat now. Why? Because the whole thing is rabbinically prohibited. It's only the Rabbanan. That's why it's so important to know what's prohibited midoraita on a Torah level and what's prohibited midorabanan rabbinically, because it'll make a huge difference. Can this guy wear his shoes on Shabbat? Yes or no? The answer is, well, if this is only rabbinically prohibited and he didn't realize he's making this mistake, he could still wear his shoes on Shabbat. So that's a very important thing. But if he did it on purpose, then even though it's rabbinically prohibited, he knew he shouldn't have done that on Shabbat, but he was just saying, it's just rabbinic, it's not a big deal, whatever. And then he had second thoughts. He comes to the rabbi, Rabbi, can I wear them? I said, did you know that you can't do it? The answer is, I knew. Okay, so you can't wear them till Motzei Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat, though, he can wear them, no problem. Okay, so it's not like the soup, that if he cooked the soup on Shabbat and he knew that he's not allowed to, he's never allowed to have the soup. That's already a different thing. That's a doraita. Okay, fine. This was only the Rabbanan, so therefore he could use the shoes Motzei Shabbat as well. Okay, clear? Good? Excellent. Now, very interesting question that comes up. There's something called transition lenses. Familiar with this? So these are lenses that you go outside and the sun hits them and they become darker, right? So it's like sunglasses all of a sudden. Very interesting story I heard about this. When I was learning in Israel, in Beit Vagan, so Beit Vagan had tremendous Talmidei Chachamim that lived there. So one was Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. I was there already after he passed away, but everybody in the neighborhood that lived together with him, they always spoke about him. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was the Rosh Yeshiva of Kol Torah. Okay, beautiful. His son, Reb Azriel Auerbach, became the rabbi of this neighborhood, Beit Vagan. Everyone goes to him. He's a massive giant. Anyway, he married the daughter of Rav Elyashiv. Rav Elyashiv, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, passed away maybe 10 years ago. And he was the Posek Hador. He was one of the greatest geniuses that we had, together with Chacham Vadia. So you had him. He was the son of Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Azriel Auerbach, who's still alive and well. And his wife was Rav Elyashiv's daughter. So one time, this rabbi told me a story. He was in the glasses shop over there on Rehova Pisgah, which is the store. There's a store there where they sell glasses. So this lady was inquiring about these glasses, and she was told that they're transition lenses. So she doesn't know what's the halacha. Can you wear them on Shabbat? Can you not wear them on Shabbat? So she asks this lady, and this lady happened to be Rebbetzin Auerbach, Rebbe Azriel Auerbach's wife. So she says, well, my father says that it's fine, but my father-in-law says you shouldn't wear them on Shabbat. So this other lady's walking by. She says, your father-in-law, go ask a rabbi. It's like, your father. Anyway, meanwhile, they're both the Gdolei Adom. But,
And yet no.
yeah, so she was like, what do I do? Anyway, so it seems to be the vast majority of all the poskim hold that it's okay to wear these transition lenses. The reason is, first of all, like we said, the coloring here is not a permanent coloring. It goes away. So it's temporary. It's not, meaning once the sun stops hitting it, it fades away. And when it does, it doesn't happen right away either. It's what we would call a grama. Grama means it happens like eventually. It sets something in motion, but it doesn't happen right away. So eventually it starts to become darker. And most importantly, it doesn't actually change the color. It just kind of darkens the shade, but it's not really coloring it. So therefore, the poskim say that the transition lenses are okay to be used on Shabbat. Okay. Now, what about sun tanning? Interesting. Person wants to go out. Let's say they're spending Shabbat, I don't know, in Miami somewhere. They want to go out, get some sun, right? So here's the thing. If you're actually doing it to get color in your skin, that you should not do. If your intention is to go and sunbathe in order that your skin should look darker, that you cannot do on Shabbat, because you intend on coloring your skin. That's a problem. However, if your intention is not that, your intention is just to get some vitamin D, it's very healthy for you. Your intention is to warm up in the sun. Maybe it's a little bit, cold, and you want to get some heat from the sun. That's okay, because your intention is not to suntan. Right, so that would be okay. It's not a problem of healing, by the way, either, because many healthy people do that. It's not an issue. And even if it would happen that by being out there, your skin would become darker and there would be some coloring happening, but again, that would be through what we would call grama. It's not, it doesn't happen right away. It's something that takes time for it to take place. And being that that's not your intention, and it's something that doesn't happen right away, we would say that that's fine. But again, it's provided that that's not what you're intending to do. If you want to sunbathe in order to become darker, that already is a problem on Shabbat. Clear? So far, so good? Okay, excellent. Now, another big question that all the poskim deal with is, what about these toilet bowls that have this kind of attachment, with that blue thing, what I'm talking about, where when you flush, then it comes out and the water becomes blue. So is that okay or not? So the Sephardic rabbis say it's a-okay. It comes to the to Chacham Vadia, Chacham Ben Zion. They all say that this is not considered to be a problem on Shabbat. Again, your intention is not to color the water. It does happen, but how long is it going to be colored until the next time that you flush? It's very temporary, and it's not your intention. So again, being that all these factors are there, the poskim permit it. Not a problem. Okay. Another very important thing to realize, there's a big discussion amongst the authorities about whether or not there is coloring by food, okay, or drinks. Believe it or not, the Ben Ish Chai was very strict in this respect. And the Ben Ish Chai said that if you're introducing any kind of color into a drink, it's a problem. So you wouldn't be allowed, according to him, to, let's say, pour tea essence into hot water. Not because of cooking, but because you're coloring the water. So according to him, it's a problem. Now you should know that most of the Sephardic poskim after the Ben Ish Chai held it's not a problem. Chacham Vadia holds it's not a problem. Chacham Ben Zion held it's not a problem. So it's important to be aware that there is a split. But the people that are diehard, hardcore Ben Ish Chai people will not put, let's say, tea essence into the water. Tea bag, tea essence, and you're coloring the thing. So what they would do, how would they make tea? They would have to have the hot water be poured onto the tea essence. So even though it ends up getting to be the same color, but you're not coloring the water. No, cooking is a separate issue. Assuming that you know how to avoid cooking over here, because Baruch Hashem, as we learned. So but the question now is a coloring question. So the difference is, if you have a cup of hot water and you pour the tea essence into it, so now you're actually coloring that hot water. That's a problem. Over here, the tea essence is just there in a cup as is, and you pour onto it. So you're not introducing color into the clear water. You're pouring clear water onto the colored item. That's how you avoid the coloring. They wouldn't put coffee, let's say ground coffee, into a hot water cup either, because that's coloring the water. They hold of coloring by drinks, coloring by food as well, they would say is a big problem. So Chacham Vadia is very clear. He says, we hold en tzviah be'ochlim ve'en tzviah be'mashkim. We don't hold that there's any kind of coloring by food or drinks at all. So for that reason, there's no problem whatsoever to, let's say, decorate, a cake with some kind of icing or something like that. There might be other issues, but generally speaking, I don't think you would have any issue of doing that. I can't see any problem with that. The fact that there's going to be some color on it now is not an issue. We hold that there's no coloring by liquids, but on one condition. On condition that your intention is not to color. In other words, if you are specifically trying to color something for the sake of coloring it, then already it's more of an issue, right?
Who does that? They just want to make a cup of tea.
Right, exactly. That would be more of an issue by that. But even there is room to be more lenient. There is room to be lenient there too, but if you can avoid literally just putting in food coloring into something for the sake of food coloring, that would be better to avoid that, because you're actually simply trying to color the item. That would be better to avoid. But if you're just trying to make food and it happens to be that there's going to be color transferring from here to there, don't worry about it. Yeah.
So according to the Ben Ish Chai, the cutting up, let's say, like a fruit platter, you put the melon and then you put strawberries next to it. It's inevitable with the red of the strawberries.
Right. Right.
Go into the melon.
So according to him, would that be an issue? I don't think so, because that's just like a little drip off of the strawberry. I think he's talking more about when you actually change the color of if you do something to
Grape juice and seltzer.
yeah, grape juice and seltzer like that would be a problem. They talk about, we know that on Friday night it's proper to use red wine. It's brought down red is a better wine to use than white. So let's say you don't have red wine, but you have some white wine. You want to color it with like some grape juice or something, or some red wine that you do have. So is that okay? So the poskim actually say that for the sake of the mitzvah, we would be lenient, even though your intention is to color, which is more of it's a bigger chidush. Okay, so that's important to be aware of. Good. All right. I think I'm done. All right, unless you have any other questions. We're good?
What are the Ashkenazis told with coloring food? I'm curious.
They're strict.
They're strict also.
Yeah, they're strict with it.
So like a tea bag, they would put a tea bag first in the cup, then put hot water over it?
Yeah, but like after cup number 3. In other words, meaning pour water into the cup from the urn, then pour it into another cup.
Okay.
So now it's kli shlishi,
Right?
right?
That's the cooking aspect.
That's the cooking aspect. And now you would have to pour onto the tea bag
Right.
as opposed to put the tea bag in.
Got it.
Yeah.
Still coloring the water.
I understand. I have the same question, to be honest with you. It's still getting the same thing, but it's different when you're introducing the colored item into the non-colored item versus when you're putting the colored item onto the non-colored item onto that which is colored. So you're not like coloring because you're not putting in the coloring item into the non-colored item. That's how they
I
do
make
it.
sangria sometimes, so I put in like a juice. I actually love making on Friday night. You put red wine with some type of soda, like a ginger ale or something like that. So you're definitely going to be coloring it. I never think about that would be a store.
Yeah, because we hold that there is no coloring by food and drink,
Right.
which is a big leniency, but it's a very helpful leniency. That Chacham Vadia, and the truth is Shulchan Aruch holds like that, so that's why he says that. Alrighty.
So putting food coloring on like